And I'm going to go ahead and start our presentation. So our presentation is on Prevention 101, which is the fundamentals of the substance prevention field. So what our course objectives are. For this course, I hope to be able to define some surrounding concepts based on basic prevention work, and it's placed within healthy communities, as well as you all gain a basic understanding of youth focus and prevention, trauma-informed prevention, and understanding of evidence-based strategies and how to apply them. So that's going to be our course objectives for going through this particular course. And we'll touch back on this at the end of the course, just to ensure that you guys understand everything. This course will increase your knowledge and development of working in substance use, gambling, and the prevention of other risk-averse behaviors. So what is prevention? Well, prevention is trauma-informed, it's risk factor conscious, it's youth positive, and it is evidence-based. Prevention is a key public health effort in maintaining healthy communities. We recognize that prevention and prevention efforts are a collection of culturally appropriate and evidence-based programs and strategies, which help people prevent their community from misusing substances or developing substance abuse disorders, as well as gambling disorders and other addictive disorders that may occur. We use common data sets across service systems, which help us to assess prevention efficiency and promote accountability in the way that our programs and strategies are developed. Within the prevention field, we work with families, communities, organizations to reduce the stigma of mental health and the number of people who face substance abuse disorders, use disorders, and substance misuse. Like I said before, to do this purposefully and masterfully, our workforce must develop to be trauma-informed, risk factor conscious. We have to promote positive youth development and healthy communities, as well as practice evidence-based programming and messaging. First, we're going to cover trauma-informed prevention and understanding what trauma is. Just a little bit of a warning for this next part. I'm not going to go into discussing different things related to trauma. I might have some examples of different events that may have been traumatic. If talking about these events causes any triggers within you, or you need to take a little bit of time away, go ahead if you need to step away from your camera or your computer to do so. Like I said, we won't be going too deep into some of these events that I'm talking about, but it's just a warning ahead of time. So what is trauma-informed prevention? Trauma-informed care approaches and strives to understand the whole individual who is seeking services. It is a system utilizing prevention, trauma-informed prevention that realizes the direct impact that trauma can have on access to services. And we respond by changing policies, procedures, and practices to minimize potential barriers in the partner community and with different individuals within that community. A system which utilizes trauma-informed approach also integrates full knowledge about trauma into all aspects of our service, and we train our staff to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma and thus avoid any possibility of causing re-traumatization. Some different things that may have caused, sorry, let me back up just a second. We go into prevention understanding that people don't necessarily use different substances just because. Some use of different substances may come from experimentation, but some forms of substance use, gambling, or addiction may come from trauma. Some situations that I'd like to kind of discuss a little bit are things such as the pandemic. During the pandemic, we've seen an increase of people using different substances such as alcohol, tobacco, different opioid level prescription drugs, as well as the incidents that may have happened in Sandy Hook, where we seen an increase of alcohol use within that community. We have to understand that the use of substance could come from trauma, and understand that when we work with any particular community or individual, that we have to come to an understanding that there may be trauma involved when we do our work with different individuals and communities. Understanding trauma. So these are the 4 R's of trauma-informed approach. The trauma-informed approach to prevention recognizes there are possible past traumas which our communities and individuals are working through, as we said before. As we also said before, they may be turned to substance use or exhibit signs that they may turn to substance abuse to mitigate their own personal or societal traumas. So if we look at this page here, we see that the 4 R's of trauma-informed approach are realization. So we realize about trauma and how it affects individuals in different groups. R, recognizing signs of trauma. We have a system to respond, and we resist re-traumatizing the individual or the community. It's important for prevention professionals or those who work with people who are undergoing recovery, treatment, health promotion, and prevention to understand how trauma can have a serious impact on different communities and our community prevention efforts. So we must recognize that possible trauma exists in this community or certain individuals in this community and how it affects us. We have to also recognize possible environmental signs of trauma in the community for community level prevention efforts. We need to have a system in place to respond to trauma. How are we going to respond to any particular trauma? If you guys have seen anything in the news lately, both in New Haven and Hartford, there were cases of overdose-related death. How are we going to respond to that trauma? What resources are in place to respond to trauma and resist re-traumatizing those who were involved with this level of trauma, and especially when the death is related to misuse or abuse of any particular substance or drugs. Next page. Key principles of trauma-informed approach. First, we have safety. We want to ensure physical and emotional safety. In practice, this can be achieved by promoting a welcoming community where privacy is respected, but also ensuring that people have a support system to turn to, and if not, helping to create a support system. Trustworthiness. We're tasked with clarity, consistency, and interpersonal boundary. Putting this particular principle to action, we want to be respectful and maintain personal boundaries. Collaboration and mutuality. This is where we make the decisions with individuals and community and share in decision power. So we don't want to entirely take over and make different policies, changes, and decision power within the community without consulting the members of that community. So the community and individuals are provided a significant role in planning and evaluating prevention services, and they know what kind of services and resources are available to them. Choice, voice, and empowerment. So the community and the individuals have a variety of choices. They have the options to make their own choices in service. In practice, we can provide a clear and appropriate messaging concerning the individuals or the community's rights and responsibilities to their own prevention services. Lastly, cultural, historical, and gender issues. Understand the pretexts of trauma, which have mostly occurred through the lens of prejudice in the community. In practice, we want to do research on the demographic and the history of our community in which we work in order to understand any potential traumas that may have occurred, if any, in that community, and to come to a understanding of how to address them with the community's full involvement with making those choices based on their historical, cultural context. Before we move forward, does anybody have any questions? Jen, do I have any questions in the chat box or anything?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, nothing in the chat box for a question right now. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any questions before we move forward? Oh, okay. So next we're going to cover risk factor consciousness. What exactly are risk factors? So risk factors are a type of correlation which are usually associated with increased probability of an unpleasant outcome. So they tend to also divide our target population into high and low categories of risk. So some examples of possible risk factors that we have are things such as homelessness, poverty, low self-esteem, unstable familial relationships. These things are likely to cause an increase in substance misuse or substance use. That's not to say that they always will, but it has been found that exhibiting more and more risk factors has been associated with increased substance use or misuse. Countering risk factors. So to counter risk factors and possible negative consequences associated with a multitude of risk factors, we have to develop what's called protective factors. Now, protective factors lower the likelihood of individuals developing behaviors that may be a future detriment to their own physical and emotional well-being. Protective factors are those that counteract and reduce our impact of a risk factor. They also increase resiliency and provide individuals with mental fortitude to manage their stressful situations. So risks, our protective factors are those that will counter our risk factors, increase the resiliency of an individual or their community, and help people to deal effectively with stressful situations. So some possible protective factors that we can look into are strong and supportive social systems, positive self-esteem, parental supervision, just basically interaction from the parental units, such as their caregivers, strong parenting skills, and individuals with good physical, mental, and emotional health are less likely to use substances or misuse substances. Going forward, we're going to go into youth positive prevention. Do I have any other questions concerning risk factors before we move forward? No. Okay. Before I move forward, I just want to say that these particular sections that we are covering, they overlap each other a bit. So we should never see them as separate things. Prevention is a whole public health system in which everything is cyclical. So the understanding trauma and risk factors are also important in developing positive youth prevention. So we want to keep in mind that we don't want to just forget what we learned in the last two sections, but that these things have an important overlap with each other and forming what we will later call evidence-based strategies. So youth positive prevention. So here we see prevention across the lifespan. So we start, even those who do not necessarily engage in substance use or abuse does not mean that they will not have adverse effects on them, but it can have adverse effects on those surrounding them. For example, within pregnancy and with infants and neonates, use of alcohol during pregnancy can also lead to developmental effects on neonates and infants after they are born, such as fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. It can also, moving forward, have adverse effects in development into childhood, as well as later on having effects on adolescents as they move forward into their young adulthood. So just because one area, infants, of course, unless you're forcing them to drink alcohol, use substances, may not necessarily have that particular thing. However, the adverse effects of people surrounding them in their community does have adverse effects on those around us. So it's important that we view prevention as a public health system where we need to target all of our lifespan in order to make a positive impact on that community, whether it be from infancy all the way up to adulthood and older adults. Going through this cycle, we know that, like I said before, that infants may have developed things such as developmental issues or fetal alcohol syndrome, which is a disorder from having alcohol during the pregnancy that could lead to developmental delays. Moving into children, children are before the age of puberty could have we want to ensure that we teach about prevention at this age, because at this age, children are curious. We have things in our house that could be harmful to children, such as prescription drugs. And it's important that we already at this age are starting to teach about prevention in the sense of things such as don't touch unmarked drugs. We need to teach parents that they are the keepers of their house and that they need to make sure that drugs are not in the easily accessible to children, as well as beginning the talks on things such as smoking and drug use at this particular age. As we move into adolescence and early adulthood, we understand that at this age that adolescents and early adults, especially during the college age, are beginning to experiment and have things such as peer pressures and peer supports, where they will obviously have a lot of influence from their peers. And we need to establish early on, especially within the childhood range, that they will need to, excuse me, that they are still under, that they still have those protective factors in place where they will be less likely to use different substances. And moving into adulthood and older adults, at this life stage, you understand that we have different stressors in life that could affect us as we move into adulthood, whether that is moving into the workforce, having responsibilities of children or the household, our jobs. We understand that we have those things in place that could act as risk factors and increase the likelihood that we would use substances. So it's important that across all of these different lifespan development stages, that we have protective factors in place that will prevent or significantly decrease the chance of use or misuse. And next slide. All right. So what can we do to improve youth outcomes? So first of all, prevention professionals should not, we should understand trauma-informed prevention. As we talked about before, that everything is overlapping. Trauma-informed prevention as well as risk factors are overlapping. We need to understand trauma-informed prevention, generational trauma, as well as potential abuse that has been passed through the lifespan. We need to understand the risk factors in that community. And we should also work to increase prevention education within the communities and schools. I'm going to take a look at I think I have a question in the chat box, but I'm also going to ask, what are some ways that you think that we can increase our outcomes so that we can try and prevent or reduce substance use outcome? So I believe, did I have a question in the chat box, Jen? No questions?
Yeah, this is Elke. I asked you a question. I think when the question I asked is somewhat in relation to the question that you're presenting. So when conducting parent and guardian groups about prevention issues, would there be any resources or links that you would suggest in regards to providing the different types of prevention work we would be doing? So if we're working with a parent who has a teenager in the high school and a child in kindergarten, what kinds of tools would you be able to provide that we can somewhat work with that, work with that parent?
Okay. So one of the things that especially we're going to talk about this as well in the evidence-based strategies section. So I have a couple of tools that I will go into a little bit more in depth when we get there too. Things such as different apps, we are actually working on a tool with, as TTAS, we're working on a tool for an ebook on how parents can talk to their children at different stages. So that's one of the things that we're going to kind of cover a little bit on as well.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Also, for folks or parents that don't have access to technology, but as prevention folks, we could give them something tangible that would be greatly appreciated as as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Do I have any more questions before we go ahead and move into the next section? Okay. So next, we're going to talk about youth development. Youth developmental assets. So the developmental assets have been provided by a Search Institute. I'm going to provide you guys some information about them later on in the presentation, but they're a research institute that provides evidence-based data in youth and child development. So they produced this developmental asset framework, which has been found to build a foundational framework in positive youth development. So there are a total of 40 youth developmental assets, and they are further divided into two categories: your internal and your external assets. So supports, opportunities, relationships that young people need across all aspects of their lives are going to be referred to as external assets. Those are the positive experiences that their families, schools, neighborhood, communities provide, as well as things that are more enforced by policy, health providers, law enforcement, other institutions. Those are going to be external assets. While things such as personal skills, self-perception, self-esteem, personal values that youth need to make positive choices and take their own responsibility and be independent, those are called internal assets. Usually these are positive skills, commitments, their personal choices and actions. So our internal assets can also be a little bit touched on by our external assets, in the sense that things such as our families and schools, neighborhoods, those things have a bit of a effect on our core guidance system as well, and how we develop our own skills and commitments and values. So here are also a couple of subcategories of the developmental assets. They've been further divided into a range of how these assets look at different developmental use stages, and how they may differ across a child's socioeconomic background, their religious and ethnic identity, the familial support and structure, as well as other factors that work in the place of the child's psyche and growth. These assets are also really important in understanding what to look out for in terms of risk factors that may need to be addressed, or they also are important in helping us understand what protective factors we can work to strengthen or further develop. So external assets are further divided into support, empowerment, boundaries, and expectations, boundaries and expectations, and constructive use of time. Internal assets are divided into commitment to learning, positive values, social competency, and positive identity. Jen, I see you have your hand raised.
I do. I just wanted to jump in with a comment here. Some people on the call may have experience with the search survey and well understood some of the developmental assets, and some may not. So I just wanted to make a comment that when looking at your results in terms of the assets, you might find discrepancies either by grade or by gender or by different subgroup populations. And when you do the deep dives into these variances, strengths, and challenges that vary across communities, it is really great opportunity to really, hail yourself of the victories where you're seeing strong numbers, and also a chance for activities and programming development to strengthen those that are coming in on the lower end. So just a comment on how these can be used in a practical sense in your community or through your work in your organization that I know an ICE coordinator did and was able to share with different agencies like schools or the health department or Parks and Rec, what have you, and collaborate with other agencies as well in using these results. Really helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
Now, these subcategories are also further broken down into their own subcategories of their own, and that's what makes up the 40 developmental assets. So I provided with you at the end of this presentation some resources on how to fully understand the developmental assets, the external and internal, as well as the other assets that are in between these subcategories, so that you guys have all of that information and an understanding of what exactly are developmental assets across in youth positive development. Next slide. So research shows, whether it is more internal or external or both, that youth with more of these assets are more likely to do well in school, be civically engaged, and value diversity and differences in others. They're also less likely to have problems with substance use, whether that is alcohol, tobacco, vaping, illicit drug use, violence, or sexual promiscuity or deviancy. And these are the 8 indicators of thriving youth. So the more developmental assets that youth in a chosen community exhibit, the more of these indicators of thriving you will most likely see in your prevention assessment. So it's important to observe your chosen population of risk factors and protective factors, the progression of developmental factors of youth within that community, and also to look at these 8 indicators of thriving in order to understand what exactly your population needs, and will you be able to, and what evidence-based strategy you should choose and how to apply it. So as we look through our 8 indicators of thriving are going to be academic success, leadership qualities, resisting dangerous or risky situations, being able to control any compulsive behavior, a willingness to help others, value and diversity, which we touched on a little bit before, maintaining their physical, mental, and emotional health, and also the ability to overcome adversity and build their own resiliency. Evidence-based practice and strategies. So this is what we do in prevention after we understand everything before. This is what we kind of build on in trying to figure out what our evidence-based strategy will be when we move into having a plan and understanding this. Do I have any questions before we move forward? Nope. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Excuse me. So evidence-based practice strategies are how we tie all of our information together. In prevention, it's important that we identify an evidence-based strategy that's inclusive. It reflects the socio-ecological model of our community. So that is, it reflects how our community works, how we have any, the diversity within our community, whether that's cultural, ethnic, religious, socioeconomic. It reflects that socio-ecological model of our community, and it addresses issues surrounding risk factors and positive youth development. So a well-developed evidence-based strategy has been evaluated and demonstrated to be effective in addressing prevention of public health issues based upon the best available evidence. So these strategies have been implemented and conducted numerous times in various contexts that can confirm the implementation of these strategies will have a positive desired effect. And we always want to try and use strategies that are evidence-based, because they're going to decrease the effect and prevalence of risk factors. So we always want to we always want to use practices that have been evaluated and definitely implemented and demonstrated to have desired effects and outcomes. We don't want to just kind of make up our own thing and then just hope for the best. So this graph shows the evidence-based effectiveness. So program that has a strength, has a high strength of evidence and a high strength of effectiveness will be well supported, and it will get you the best evidence. So if we don't have any evidence of it being effective and that there's no strength of the evidence that we find, then it could be unsupported and not good to use, or it can even be harmful in using this any particular method or strategy in prevention. So research-based evidence can tell us if a prevention strategy has been shown to be highly effective, moderately effective, or ineffective in achieving its desired outcomes. So this is referred to as the levels of effectiveness. In order to assess the quality and meaningfulness of research-based evidence, the strength of the scientific evidence must also be considered. So the strength of scientific evidence refers to how rigorously any particular program has been evaluated and how strong the evidence is that the program produces the desired outcomes, rather than other factors such as increasing more risk factors. So our evidence-based strategies and best practices also leverage all of these. Good evidence-based strategy will come from knowledge and values, attitudes and behaviors, covers attitudes and behaviors, developmental age and history, goals and expectations. I'm not going to read through all of these, but these are all different ways in which we want to make sure that our evidence-based strategy addresses these particular things. Not too long ago, we had a evidence-based strategy presentation, which we also offer at TTAS, that covered social marketing. And this is important when making our strategy, that we cover things such as social marketing and moving forward into different best practices to address and leverage on. So I believe was it Elke? Yes. So I'm going to cover some different evidence-based strategies based on different levels. That's going to be individual level, school level, and community level. So one of these strategies that we have right now, we have a couple strategies on this page. So Smokescreen is an online game that is used for health and learning. So this is for changing the perception of risk, beliefs, and increasing knowledge to an individual about early adolescent smoking and vaping. We also have the Nora app, which is for naloxone plus overdose response app, which is an app provided by the Connecticut Department of Health. So it provides information on how to locate facilities that have naloxone, which is also known as Narcan, on hand, as well as training resources on how to treat overdose. The app also has information on prescription disposal, information on identifying opioids and recognizing the signs and symptoms of possible use. So it's a really handy app, and it helps to provide more education on perception of risk of opioid use, and as well as how to prevent and treat different opioid overdoses. So that's an example of some of the individual level strategies that we can use. At the school level, some examples of that we can use at the school level is promoting a drug-free campus policy. We can also prohibit the acceptance of any curriculums that come from tobacco, opioid, or alcohol-related industries. Two other strategies that we have here are the Catch My Breath and the Project Alert. Catch My Breath was a school-based education program developed by the University of Texas School of Public Health. Project Alert is addresses pro-drug mindset of middle school aged adolescents, and increases their the likelihood to remain drug-free, as well as promote anti-drug mindset and display risk factors about drug use. Forward. The community level. So I'm going to touch more on the community level. School level, we also work a lot within the school level, but I'm going to touch a little bit more on the community level. Community level evidence-based strategies, we can work with the bans on advertising for tobacco, alcohol, and vaping, as well as increasing compliancy checks. A lot of us, we might work with local businesses to limit where alcohol products can be sold as far as zoning, and also helping to set and lobbying to set a minimum age of legal purchasing within our own communities. Other possible prevention strategies within the community are advocating for social media and social marketing campaigns within that cover prevention strategies, community forums, going out and having community health fairs that cover the topic of Narcan use or any other thing like that. I know that a couple weeks back, but last year in Meriden, we actually had some folks come by from, I believe it was Rushford. Well, I'm pretty sure it was Danny, but they came out and did a health fair where they talked about Narcan use, and they made their presence known within the community that they were there. So that is also a good community prevention strategy, is letting your community know that you're there for the resources that they need for prevention of tobacco use, alcohol use, opioid use, and overdose. Next slide, please. Next, we have prevention and what we can do about it. So parents, it's always good. I've seen a couple of people on the first poll that we did about substance use, who were parents to possible children, adults, or what have you. But the best thing a parent can do is be substance-free themselves. It sets a good example to their children that this is the behavior that we want to exhibit. So it's also never too late to quit. And to also talk to their children about vaping, substance use, marijuana use in the community and how it's unsafe. Administrators and in schools, we can talk about the hazards of substance use, as well as promote a 100% drug-free campus. Of course, I know teachers have a lot to do and teach within their curriculum, but it's also pretty good if we have other people within the school systems, whether that's through clubs or youth groups, that can promote youth prevention education within the schools and best practices. Within our communities, we can implement evidence-based strategies that are for smoke-free laws. A lot of you may have, I'm not that old, but I remember back when people could smoke in restaurants. And now it's been made policy that a lot of times you can't smoke in a restaurant. And that is due to policies put in place to make smoke-free public places and to increase the perception of risk of tobacco use. So we can also enforce tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis sales up to the age of 21, which tobacco and alcohol are at that level. As well as adopting tobacco and alcohol-free policies and promoting those lifestyles. So I just kind of want to cover some things that we've kind of gone over. We finished quite a bit early, but I'm going to go over some other stuff. Things that we have covered are what is prevention and what prevention professionals need to know. We've covered understanding trauma systems when engaging in prevention and other public health systems. We've also covered how prevention is connected across the developmental lifespan and the effects that it has on those who do not use substances. We've covered youth development and understanding of the impact of risk factors and protective factors in development. And we've also covered understanding evidence-based prevention strategies and how to pick up the best strategies for our prevention efforts. Lastly, we've also covered possible resources that you guys might be able to use at different levels of your prevention effort. So just really quick, I kind of just want to go over if you guys want to chat, or if you guys want to turn on your mic and kind of talk about different things that you guys have in place. I just kind of wanted to ask, like, what kind of prevention strategies do you have in place? Or if you're new to this and you're just getting started, like, are there any particular prevention strategies that we've covered that you kind of want to touch on a little bit more, maybe even go into a little bit more? Nope.
Gonna have to pick on people, Shay.
Yeah, I might have to pick on people. Okay, so let me pull up a description.
I actually have a question, if it's okay, and if this is not the right forum, let me know or guide me in the right direction. So this is Elke from Danbury. I apologize for coughing a lot. I am recovering from COVID, but my question is, and I've been talking with some parents who are elders who are raising youth who have been engaging in alcohol and cannabis use. And then there's a concern of pill use in Connecticut with fentanyl and everything. So one of the questions that the parents asked me is, when we take away the alcohol and cannabis or whatever they're utilizing, what are we utilizing for them? If they're if that's used as a coping mechanism, right? Unhealthy coping mechanism, but it's used as an unhealthy coping mechanism. What can we store in place for them when a lot of treatment facilities, whether it's for behavior and mental health, there's a long waiting list, there's a lack of culturally responsive care for a lot of our community youth. So those are questions I've been getting asked, and I'm wondering if there's any resources or insight to that, because the prevention messages are so important. But in regards to intervention as well, I don't know if there's any suggestions or ideas folks may have in regards to that.
Okay, and if you guys have any, this might not necessarily be the best forum for it, but if you guys have any input for her as well, go ahead and jump in. But my question is understanding where, like, the reason for why they're using this as a coping mechanism. If it's used for a coping mechanism, understand why are they using it as a coping mechanism? Is there an underlying mental health issue, or is there peer pressure to use? What kind of where are they on the lifespan development level where they are using it? Whereas I'm coming from an understanding of young adults are going to be a little bit more experimenting in things. When we cover trauma, is there trauma involved where they feel that they are using it to kind of numb those feelings of the trauma that they may have experienced? So first and foremost, I think that it's important to understand if there is trauma involved, where they are on the youth development timeline cycle. And then looking for healthier alternatives to substance use, whether that's and I'm not saying I'm not a mental health therapist or anything, or anything like that, so I can't necessarily say oh, I think that you should do this or that or whatever. But a healthier coping mechanism, whether that's engaging in more community events, such as having more community service oriented, joining youth clubs that they might be interested in that might help that. Or even if they're hanging out with peer groups that might not necessarily be the best for them, is there a way to engage in healthy peer support and get that peer support that they need in this time that they are going through that change from using substances to trying to find a different outlet?
If I can jump in.
Yep, go ahead, Terry.
Gabor Mate said at one point that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but rather connection.
Exactly.
And I think one intervention, and it seems, kind of obvious, but if people are willing, is to, get into a group of some kind, support group, whether Elke just received a grant for the recovery groups for youth. I think that is going to be a great support in her area. Al-Anon, AA, NA. There, are all kinds of things like that, support groups for people who have lost those to an opioid overdose. We have all those in place. So helping people see the value in those groups and connecting with others, I think is paramount.
Thank you, Terry. Does anybody want to add anything or touch on anything about any of the community or schools or any of the evidence-based practices that we covered? Are you guys using any of the evidence practices that we covered, or are there any that you would like to add? And I'm actually going to pick on Danny because I think I've seen him out there at that table. So can you tell us a little bit more about the community, any of the community events that you guys do, Danny?
Yes, thank you for picking on me. I appreciate it. We try to get out there and do as much as we can in the community. Any events that we hear about, we're connected to the Meriden Chamber of Commerce. So the last event we did was last week. We did an event at the high school, which was a community resource fair for parents and kids. We obviously brought our information as to who we are, Meriden Healthy Youth Coalition. We've been, around for a while, but a lot of the people in the city don't know us. So we also have a huge staff turnover at this point. So I'm really, standing tall and taking the lead and really want to get us out there. I know as for, our efforts, like I was jotting things down, I'm trying to get into the high schools more. We started working with the mental health group at one of the local high schools. They're very excited, very driven kids, but they're very focused on mental health. So I'm trying to throw that in there with also the, substance abuse awareness and things like that, because that leads to that. And a lot of them are dealing with the mental health because most of them, did a lot of virtual last year schooling. So for them to get back in the swing of things has been tough. So we're assisting with that. I work with I'm really close with the library here in Meriden, try to do programs with them. There's another program here in Meriden, Ballhead Inc., which I'm close to. A good friend of mine runs it. And we're just all about the youth. I also jotted down, we push, growth mindset a lot to get them started. And then from there, I cover the prevention pieces, especially now with the marijuana and it becoming, legal, and a lot of kids thinking that the ones that do use it or, have used it, it's natural. It's like, nah, not anymore. It's not. Like, so we, it's just a lot of education that we put out there, but we really try, to get ourselves out there, especially, here with our department. And we have the MORE program upstairs, which is for adults for the opioid response grant that we work with. And, those adults also are parents, so they need the education and prevention as well. So that's what we try to do. I'm just trying to get my face out there more in the city. I think I have seen you at some events, maybe at the Christmas in the Village. I think I seen you and we were like, she looks familiar, but we just laid in the cut. We didn't really, hey, but we're trying, and our efforts are there, and we're doing it from a good place with a good heart, and we're doing it with compassion. So hopefully, we get out there more and make a difference.
Thanks for sharing, Danny.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yes, it was Christmas in the Village.
Yeah.
So Holly says there's also a great book called Lost Connections by Joanne Hari. It's about the importance of connection and recovering from depression. I think many of the connections he references can be applied to our work in prevention. That sounds awesome, Holly. That seems like a good book that I'd like to read. And if you guys would like to read also, I can also add that as a reference when I send you guys out these slides. As a question, has anybody, especially those who are at the 0 to 10 year mark, has anybody had to deal with, in reference to substance use and abuse, the mental health aspect, and how have you been dealing with the mental health aspect of substance use and abuse?
I can, if you don't mind, I can go because I work with the prenatal, excuse me, the 5 population. And our target right now for the grant that we have are youth who are experiencing their first pregnancy, not just moms, but dads.
Mhm.
So we do a great bit of education around substance use, especially when it impacts prenatal development. And it's also important for the fathers to understand that even though they're not the ones carrying the baby, how the substance affects their biological makeup, and especially while mom is pregnant and those impacts that it can have on the unborn. And we also do some education with a curriculum called Parent as Teachers, where we talk about how those things interfere with breastfeeding for moms who wish to breastfeed. And we give a whole education about how that's transferred in the breast milk. And we also, there was a question that you asked about depression. So part of being in our program is you have to do a PHQ-9. And we do that depression scale on now, this particular go around, we're doing that on both mom and dads. But we focus on doing that for a full year. And we work along with an agency at UConn called Mind Over Mood, because the therapist can come into the home of the families as opposed to the families getting up and having to leave. Of course, right now everything is virtual, but we do quite a bit of educational piece around that mental health and depression, along with the, moms are really struggling to try to stop using. And that type of home visit has to occur more than once a week, which is the standard. But we are doing some really good work in our early childhood home visiting programs across the state.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sadie.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else want to have any last comments or questions, or even a story that they want to share?
Hi, this is Shauna. I
Shauna.
work for DPH, and I'm based at the Chief Medical Examiner's office in Farmington pretty much every day. And I'm funded through the OD2A grant through the CDC, and I'm the Overdose Fatality Review Coordinator for the state. And part of my role here, in addition to some epidemiology, is to speak with next of kin, family, and friends of decedents who have died due to overdose or suicide. And through these interviews, which are very intimate, it helps to inform prevention strategies and prevention frameworks. So whether it's through ACEs, adverse childhood events, or some of the things that you mentioned in the slides earlier, trauma, I'm so glad you mentioned that, is just enormous in terms of particularly unresolved or unaddressed, or maybe perhaps even ignorance to trauma is a common theme throughout. And I also do some warm handoffs to for people within the family who have opiate use disorder or substance use disorder, and then grief support to the extent I'm able anyway, to be able to provide that. So hopefully that will help inform prevention strategies moving forward. So it's one way. Hopefully it's an evidence-based practice in terms of gathering data and information. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shauna.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go ahead and we're going to move forward. I have a couple of resources that I wanted to share with you guys. The first resources that we have is, of course, the Nora app. I've seen a couple of you guys who knew about it, and I'm really happy that you guys know about this app and how to use it. It comes in both English and Spanish, so I think that's awesome that it's bilingual app so that more people have access to it. There's also the Catch My Breath, which is an evidence-based vaping prevention curriculum. This one's also pretty great. It's developed by the University of Texas, and it I've gone to the website, gone through all of the curriculum. So that's why I feel comfortable recommending this resource to you guys. The graphics are great on it, and it does a great job explaining vaping prevention and risk factors involved with vaping, as well as risk perception. Project Alert is also a substance abuse prevention curriculum. This one is specifically focused on middle grades. So middle grades of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Also a really good use of prevention curriculum. So if you guys work with youth organizations, schools, or your parents or anything like this, this is a great curriculum to go through for those middle grades and talking to those grades. Next, I kind of went over this one a little bit, but the Health Policy Institute of Ohio has an online guide to evidence-based prevention. It provides a guide to evidence-based prevention, has a lot of background information about evidence-based prevention and how to make the best choice in which evidence-based prevention strategy you decide to choose. And it's a very good read if you're really into like understanding the scientific level of evidence-based prevention and how we come up with the strategies that we come up with, as well as going more in depth on the methodology of creating evidence-based prevention strategies and how we basically have how we employ and implement evidence-based strategies. Lastly, the Search Institute, we went over this when we went over the developmental assets of developmental asset framework. This goes more into depth on the 40 developmental assets. It also provides some other resources on youth development. It goes really in depth on prevention in youth development, how to further develop positive protective factors, how to minimize risk factors, and how to create and instill a thriving mentality in youth. Right before we leave, I'm actually gonna pull up another poll. And this is going to be a exit poll. And I kind of just want to see like where you guys are when from the start of the training to now. Just 2 questions. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And I'll give you guys about a minute to go through this. I'll give you guys another 5 seconds. 2, 1, and input. All right, so let's share the results. Number 1, prevention is trauma-informed, risk factor conscious, youth positive, evidence-based, all of the above, none of these. You guys all got it right. It's all of the above. It is trauma-informed, risk factor conscious, youth positive, and evidence-based. Next one, moving down. Ooh, we got quite a few answers here. So evidence-based strategies, select all that apply. So evidence-based strategies are, I'm going to actually read the ones that are correct. So evidence-based strategies are, evidence-based strategies have been evaluated and demonstrated to be effective in preventing health problems based upon the best available evidence, and also have been implemented several times in various contexts to confirm that their implementation leads to the desired outcome. So that's going to be B and D, or the second one and the fourth one. So we're going to say, so evidence-based strategies are not strategies that you come up based on your own conclusions, your own formulation and formulating your own strategy. They have to be strategies that have been implemented, they have been tested, tried, and have been confirmed to have the correct desired effect that they want to be, which is to lower the risk factors. And they also not necessarily can be applied to multiple substances and age groups, because of course, children are going to be different from adults. Use of cannabis is going to have a different perception of risk from use of alcohol. So one evidence-based strategy might not work for multiple substances or age groups. So we have to, of course, look at the research and see what is the best age group or the best substance to apply a particular evidence-based strategy to. But overall, good job, guys. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to stop sharing. Lastly, I want to go over some events and resources that we have going on. So February 24th, we are actually having a presentation given by Jen Jacobson, who is on the call right now, on evidence-based strategies, youth engagement. She's already provided us with evidence-based strategies on social marketing, and it was a great presentation. I encourage you all to sign up for this event. It's going to be a great event. She goes really in depth on picking in your evidence-based strategies and applying those evidence-based strategies. We are also having an event on February 9th, 16th, and the 23rd. This is going to be a research and presentation event with Dr. Ijima Opara on the substance use in the Black community. She's going to be giving a research presentation followed by a professional presentation and a youth panel presentation on those 3 different dates. You can see that will be on our website. In March, I will also be putting on a Prevention 101 policy and continuum of care in prevention. This will be it won't be a continuation, it's a standalone presentation on the policy and continuum of care and prevention. And it will be a great event. And I'll go further in depth on the different things, other topics within prevention. The end of January, we are actually at TTAS releasing our parent opioid ebook. This ebook will go over topics such as what are opioids, how to identify an overdose, statistics about Connecticut overdose and opioid use, as well as tips and tricks on talking to different age groups for parents. This ebook will also be available in English and Spanish, and we are preparing for a release on that. So you guys get to hear all about it before we release it to everybody else. We also have a newsletter that we have that is going to have all of our training events and resources. If you're already a part of our newsletter mailing list, great. If not, I will also send out the link for that. And so that you can join and get all the news and updates about the prevention field, as well as all of our cool events and resources that we have coming out. And also check out our website at preventiontrainingcenter.org to get more on events, different resources, and all of that stuff. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to add? I would love if you guys would also give me some feedback. I'm going to send out a survey to you guys, as well as this entire presentation. And if you guys want to share the presentation with any of your colleagues, I will also have a video available too. Stop sharing. Anybody? Yes.